decided that it was time to have maybe, I'm sorry?
Sorry, I just hit the record button.
Okay. I guess Chris has decided it's time to update things, and I would wholeheartedly agree. And Chris has done a substantial amount of work already. And we have created a task force that is looking into the committee, its charge, and many other aspects of it, and where we should go from here. I think the committee had 3 or 4 of us on it. We have met on 3 different occasions now through Zoom, actually one in person before Christmas. And Chris, why don't you give us an update on where you think we are and where you think we're going?
Perfect. Thanks, Dr. Tom. So to recall the last council meeting we had back in October, I had shared what I described as an outline for a new strategic plan that we would be updating every 3 years on the purpose of this council and the actions we're taking and how we measure our progress. So since that meeting, we've had 2 task force follow-ups. First one was late November. And the approach for these breakout are to tackle individual topics. So the topics within this outline include a little bit of the history of this council, the purpose of it, the purpose of the plan, the kind of look back of previous plans, which on a go forward basis we would have, the themes in which we're trying to accomplish and the goals that we put in place and the way we're going to measure ourselves to these goals, and then the strategies and tactics that we deploy to make progress on these goals. So the first topic we handled in the task force was around the history. So thank you to Dr. Tom for taking the first crack at outlining the history of this council and its relationship with the other city services and the evolution of disaster preparedness on the peninsula. So we've got one piece kind of in place there for the history. And then the more recent task force meeting we had just a week or so ago, we tackled 2 other topics. That was the purpose of the disaster council. So in that we borrowed from the bylaws, and then we also kind of crafted a definition of what a disaster is and fundamentally broadened it to include things like public safety power shutoffs, heat waves, floods, but also pandemics, and crafted some language that means it's broader and not inclusive and limited to just those. Lori is following up to make sure we're not ensuring that this definition that we're using works with any local laws or state laws, that we're just making sure we're not being too restrictive or too broad in that definition. The second topic we had was around the goals for this coming 3-year period. So again, to recap from the outline, there's 4 goals that we crafted, each kind of with a different purpose on individual or community preparedness, as well as the purpose of this council back to local town councils. So goal 1 is kind of that individual kind of communication access. Goal 2 is around individual preparedness, so making sure you can take care of your own household. Goal 3 is based around community preparedness. Not only are you prepared, but you can offer aid to your neighbors and to be prepared or to react to a disaster. And then goal 4 is around the kind of 360 accountability between things that come out of this group, tsunami signs, evacuation decals. If those get held up in implementation, this group is empowered to try to unblock those efforts. So in this discussion, the next step that we decided is myself, Dr. Tom, Jerry, and Jamie have each taken one of these goals. And so the next meeting we have back as this task force, we're going to share how we have defined this goal, how we're going to measure that goal, and a kind of sample report, so that in subsequent disaster council meetings on this quarterly basis, you'll see through each of these goals just that progress over that quarter. So as an example, the goal that I've taken on as the project is that first one around emergency communication. And the way we plan to measure that is around alert Marin signups. So we'll have a way to measure on a periodic basis the volume of signups we have. Lori is working with our counterpart in the county sheriff's department for Alert Marin to see how granular we could measure again, on a time basis, on a geographic basis. And as we were kicking off this call, we started talking about the recent tsunami and using kind of that as a moment in time, possibly partnering with the ARC or maybe the Independent Journal, and reminding people to sign up for things like Alert Marin, that then we could see the measure over time from pre-tsunami to post-tsunami content to see if that's actually grown, those registrations, right? And thinking of other strategies throughout the 3-year period to drive greater and greater sign-up, so that at least we can get the message out to individuals during disasters. And so my colleagues for those other goals will similarly create a way to measure, a way to kind of approach these different goals, all again in the name of revitalizing the Disaster Council and making progress on the peninsula's preparedness.
Well, Chris, thanks very much. And I think this is long overdue. I really commend you on having the incentive and the desire to get this thing up and running. I think most of us that are on this group realize that over the past 30 years or so, we have done a great job of educating the dais of the 6 or 7 people who come to the meetings, but have not been very successful in getting either city council involved, really not terribly successful at getting police or fire, or ultimately the community. So we need, I think, through this whole process, once it's completed, we will have some obligations that fall on our committee and people on the committee, as Chris just described, to follow those things, investigate those different aspects, and along with police and fire, not obviously interrupting or getting involved with their operations, but with the overall oversight of the peninsula. Then have some feedback from both city councils, because we'll be obligated to present some of these things to the city councils, and hopefully come up with some measurable goals after, well, hopefully annually, and then certainly every 3 years. This was patterned pretty much after an effort with Tom Welsh in Mill Valley that seems to have worked relatively well. So we're going to try that. And let's see, anybody else? Mike Lantier, we were going to ask you, I wrote this history on the fly. It does need to be corrected by Tiburon Fire, because there's some dates and some other things that probably are not accurate, and we need to make sure. I didn't put names in or anything, just tried to keep it fairly generic, and it's probably a little too wordy. So if you and Rich could perhaps take a look at that and give us your idea of what to do with that. It's more of a preamble to the whole scenario, or maybe an addendum. We don't know at this point.
You bet. Yeah, and I'd promised that in our breakout session, and I apologize, I missed the last meeting, so I owe you all 500 push-ups.
Well, when you get that done, if you would, just get it off to Lori and to me, and then we'll kind of go with it from that point. This isn't a process that we're going to accomplish overnight. This is going to take some time. So let's see, Jamie, any comments from you in regard to this task force?
Well, I would just underscore for the group, for the people that aren't on the task force, that the purpose of of having these 4 sets of goals and report on them quarterly is to hold us accountable as members of this council, and to do it every quarter for the next year at least, so that we embed these major themes of what we're trying to accomplish collectively, that's all of us, in the culture of the Disaster Council. And so, you know, to the extent that anybody from the city or the town or police or fire have input, you know, that they think, or they, you know, whether it's a suggestion or whether you think somebody's inhaling, you should step in and say so. And you can do that to the individual and just say, I think you're off base, or I think you'd be more effective if you did the following. Because what we're doing is we're looking at this year as a year to make a transformation, if you will, as you can tell, into a more capable council. And so any and all of your input would be helpful.
Any comments from any of the professionals? I don't know, Robert, Ryan, Jason, Mike. We obviously are not in the business of trying to interfere with your operations or what you're doing. I think our major concern is trying to involve the public in this thing and get better interchange from the standpoint of the public and the professional services on the community. Also try to impress upon, which we certainly have tried to do with our Black Hat program in Belvedere, that our professional services are going to be significantly overwhelmed or underproductive and overwhelmed, I guess, if we have a major disaster. And that's when neighbors helping neighbors and block captains and all of those sorts of things come into play. We need to work at those. COVID has caused some real problems for us over the past 2 years, but once we ever get that or get beyond that, we'll hopefully start getting some of these programs back into order so that we're helpful to the community.
And I think that the strategic plan that Chris and the task force have been working on is a way to kind of track all of those efforts and like Chris was saying, keep the accountability and measure so we can actually come back and report in the progress of the block captains, of the communications, of the different efforts being made. So I think that this is a real good step, and Chris should really be applauded for spearheading this one.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to also add, this is Holly Thier from the Town Council, member of the committee, that Chris, I wanted to thank Chris for all his work. It's fantastic to watch. And maybe a good idea is that we could get this in the TIB talk once you're ready.
Mhm.
And that might be a really good way to disseminate the information and also get some input.
Great. Love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
And I think we should get back to the agenda, Dr. Cromwell, since we've got 25 minutes till our presenter is here.
Okay. So that's pretty much where we are anyway with Chris's effort. And I also, Chris, I thank you very much for getting us up to speed on this thing. And we would certainly appreciate any input from any of the professionals in any way at any of our meetings or private discussions or whatever. Because as I say, we are not trying to get in your way. We're simply trying to help the community. One way we're trying to do that is the Belvedere Block Captain program, which has now been in operation for about 5 or 6 years now. The last 2 years have been very problematic because our training and all of our exercises were very, very face-to-face. We couldn't do that over the past 2 years. We tried to get some of our block captains call their assigned residences to try to assess their welfare. I'm not sure that was terribly successful, but we can certainly try to crank that up again if necessary. I think one example of that would be just this last Saturday when we had the tsunami alert. Most people on the community had absolutely no idea what that was about. And if our block captains would have stepped up to the plate and simply called their 10 or 12 residences and said, this is what we know about this. And this is sort of where we are. And that I think will be very helpful to us. From the standpoint of training, we have had two training exercises over the past year. Adam Gazer, that most of you know, who is now our Citizen of the Year in Belvedere for this year, has been very interested in participating and actually is now co-chairing the Block Captain Committee and has taken the radio communication aspect of it and the training aspect of it under his wing. And so he will be organizing those two. And I will be working mostly on the medical stuff, the medical trailer and medical equipment. So we're dividing our efforts up in that way. We have had 2 training programs combined. We have trained about, I think, 50 of our block captains. So it's about half of our block captains in these 2 training programs. One was last January, and the other one was just in the first part of December of this year. What we do in those is meet outside with the group. We go over to the radio communications. And by the way, we have now an entire new radio system because our original radios that we had simply were not adequate. So we have found some funding and purchased an entire new radio system that have now been distributed to all the block captains. They are now have been trained, and they will continue to be trained at the various meetings that we have. So we go over that as sort of the first part of the meeting, and then we divide the group up into groups of probably 6 or 7 people and have stations that they will go to. One of those is down power lines, and we try to talk about those and how they handle that. Another one has been medical aid, and I serve as a victim of a fall. And the block captains come in, and our hope is that they will assess what's going on and what to do with it. And I will tell you, we have a long way to go. They're very enthusiastic about it, but they're not physicians, they're not nurses. And we haven't, because of COVID, been able to do a very good job of having some training programs over the past year or two. So we will crank those up once we get going. From the standpoint of professional help, I have a list of about 10 or 15 volunteer physicians and nurses from the peninsula, a few in Tiburon, mostly Belvedere, but I want to get a few more from Tiburon. And once that is organized, and they will participate in our, not as block captains, but as sort of a trailer team. And when and if we ever have to activate our trailer, they will be responsible for the trailer. I will familiarize them with the equipment that's on the trailer, how to utilize it. And so that would handle that aspect of it. And our block captains would bring the wounded to wherever the trailer is, and provide what sort of temporary medical care. This is not meant to be a MASH unit. We're not trying to do anything of that sort. We are simply trying to set something up with the considerable talent that is already on the peninsula in the event that we are isolated or can't get people off the peninsula evacuated or can't get any help in onto the peninsula. These folks would step forward, and we can provide some, again, not surgical care. We're not trying to do that, but we could certainly start IVs, treat fractures, burns, all things of that kind. And we do have substantial medical equipment stored now at Del Mar School and also in our trailers. So that's moving along. We have also had a session with our block captains on go bags, what should be in go bags. So those are things we've been doing. We'll continue to do that. And any questions about our block captain program? What our intent also is to get more participation from Tiburon. And I think we will be able to accomplish that with time. Other comments? Holly, any comments from you're obviously pretty involved with Tiburon. Are you still there? Apparently not. Okay.
I'm still here, sorry.
All right, no problem. Do you have any comments about our block captain program?
No, I think it's great, and I think it's going to make a huge difference, and it already has. I think it's one of the most essential ways of delivering, disaster services on the day of when you really need it. Having the block captains in place that have reached out to their neighbors, and it's a fantastic program.
Well, if any of you folks in Tiburon have any ideas about how to expand the program to Tiburon.
Dr. Cromwell, we do have quite a few homeowners associations in Tiburon that have block captain programs going, and maybe it would be worthwhile to get them together with Belvedere block captains and share ideas.
Do we actually have block captains, or do we have just someone who has taken a lead? I have been approached, Lori, over the past year or two by very well-meaning, actually friends of mine in Tiburon, who asked me to come over and talk to a group of 7 or 8 people in their particular community about what we're doing in Belvedere, which I have done, but that's about as far as it's gone. In a couple of instances, I've been asked to come over and set the thing up in Tiburon, which is not very doable. So we need to get a little bit more participation from that standpoint in Tiburon.
So that's why I think maybe it would be a good idea to have active block captain programs like yours in Belvedere, and the Del Mar Homeowners Association is very active. It would be nice to maybe get all together and brainstorm together. So we should do that in the future. And I would like to, sorry to do this, but move us along with 15 minutes left to go. We still have 3 things on the agenda before
Okay.
presenter gets here. We still have new business to get to after we're done with old business.
Okay. One other comment, who is our school representative now on this committee? Do you have any idea?
His name is Carlos Estrella,
How do you spell it?
Estrella, I believe.
I need to meet with him, and I also need to meet with the new director, and I will do that at some point. Because we are utilizing Del Mar School to a great extent in that plan. All right, let's go ahead then with the evacuation decals. Back to that single issue.
Robert and I talked a little bit earlier about moving forward with these, especially in light of evacuation is such a hot topic. And I'm going to let Robert take this one first, and then I'll speak for Public Works in Tiburon, or I will try.
Well, I'll see. Thanks, Lori. I'll see if I can do this without putting my foot in my mouth. I think that Belvedere has in general, at the council level, supports the decals. They were interested to know, obviously, the implementation plan for that, where they're going to be placed, and how the communication is going to go out to the community to get people aware of what they're there for and what they're not there for. So I know it went to our city council in the past, who approved it, but there were some roadblocks in the communication plan going forward. Like I said, I don't think it needs to go to council again because of that action that they did before. And we'd be interested in implementing that. I know that other jurisdictions are ahead of us on this issue. So I think before we start, gluing or applying these to the surface of the ground, it'd be good to hear back from them, on their initial thoughts and comments, maybe from this last, tsunami alert that we got over the weekend, to see if there's any ways to improve the implementation of that and the placement and the communication going forward. But in large part, I think we supported on the Belvedere side. And I'd like to think about incorporating this plan into our overall disaster emergency plan going forward for evacuations. So yeah, thanks for chatting today earlier, Lori, I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I think Patrick,
Hang on, Jamie, for just a second. Lori, go ahead.
for Patrick Kurz, I think he's just been waiting for Belvedere and the fire department to all get together. I think Tiburon was just kind of in a holding pattern, waiting for us to all be, and Southern Marin Fire to all be on the same page. And I think we all are now. So I think that I think maybe Robert's got their idea. Let's see best practices and then move forward together.
Well, as I recall, we have had the okay from both city and town councils. Is that correct?
Correct.
And we've had the okay from this council.
Correct.
So who are our placeholders, Robert, that we need to get any information from as far as proceeding with this program?
Well, we have a new mayor in Belvedere. I'm sure that I'll need to brief her and the city manager on the new updated plan before we roll it out. But I think myself, Lori, Mike Lantier, and the chief, we could get together and start working on this.
Okay.
Just a second,
Yeah,
Tom.
Jamie, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's all right. I think where we were held up last time we had this conversation was that Southern Marin covers more than just the Tiburon Peninsula, so to speak. And they had a concern that if these decals were placed on streets in Tiburon, that their residents that were not in Tiburon were going to be upset because they weren't being placed where Southern Marin has responsibility that's county or or Mill Valley, I guess.
And Jamie, I think that was put to rest a lot of it. And Mike, tell me if I'm wrong here, but Southern Marin Fire and Mill Valley, they all merged together. We're all kind of working, we're all in on it together now. Mill Valley already had the decal. Southern Marin Fire became one with them. And we're all on the same page. Tiburon Fire and Southern Marin Fire all got together and met.
All right,
I think
okay,
we're all
That's
like-minded
great.
now.
that's great. That's just my recollection of the last blockage we had.
Yeah, thank
But
you.
Mike,
And speaking of Southern Marin Fire, I don't know if you guys noticed, but we have had Marshall now, the fire inspector from Southern Marin Fire, has joined us. He's going to be our guest presenter today.
Okay.
Welcome, Marshall.
Marshall,
Sure.
we'll get to you in just a minute here. We've
No
just got
problem.
a couple of other quick issues. Mike, in regard to this issue, my impression a year and a half ago was that the controversy was between Southern Marin and Tiburon Fire, the chiefs primarily. And according to Rich, that has been resolved. Is that in fact true? So this is
That
not.
is true. That is true. We had
Okay.
a huge summit at Pete's Coffee. We came in kind of like the Jets. They came in. It was like West Side Story. No, I'm kidding. We hashed it out. It's obviously something that we appreciate everyone looking at it from every angle. But since that time, I mean, we've got Alert Marin and Zone Haven now that could not physically send you information down the wrong path, which was the initial concern, is that this marker could send somebody to the in the wrong direction. What I think we know now is, and we're going to see this from Marshall's presentation, the technology is really going to drive us to exact information minute by minute through Alert Marin, the LRAD system, Zone Haven. So I think we've kind of got this thing done, and I'm really would love to see this move forward and be completed, because right now Mill Valley and Southern Marin are pretty much working under the same umbrella, and Mill Valley was the lead. They were the pilot on this, so
Right.
I think it's time to do it. So that's
So we can assume that Southern Marin and Tiburon Fire are both in agreement with this program.
I concur. Yes, I think so.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So Robert and you and I guess whomever else you feel is important to get this thing resolved could get together sometime in the next, couple months before our next meeting anyway, and come up with a program that we can actually get off the ground.
And I'll absolutely arrange that meeting going forward.
Okay,
So
anything else about evacuations, decals, and that sort of stuff?
can we move on to the new business real quick, which I think are going to be two pretty quick items?
Okay, all I have now left is the presentation on our siren system. Do you have some other new
So
business?
we missed at the very top of the agenda, we missed the new business. So the first one was the winter storm flooding preparedness and response by Public Works.
But Patrick is not here, is that correct?
I've got Robert Zadnik from Belvedere Public Works, and I'm going to speak on behalf of Patrick, and I can keep this pretty short and sweet, and I'm sure Robert can too. I don't know if everybody was following along with all of the winter storms that we had and the huge rainfall that we had. There was flooding, but we weathered very well. And I wanted to really applaud Public Works from both Belvedere and Tiburon because of their mitigation of them going out and clearing the storm drains and making sure the roadways were clear and trimming back trees. We had very little problems here. And when we did, there were Belvedere and Tiburon Public Works employees out there after hours working in pouring down rain to clear the gutters, and other agencies, other jurisdictions had all sorts of issues, and we fared so well. And I really, really believe it's because of our departments of Public Works. And so I really wanted to kind of put the spotlight on them and thank them. And Robert, if you'd like to get into more detail about what your guys did.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. I'll keep it really quick. Everything you said is exactly what has happened. We coordinated quite a bit between both departments, Tiburon and City of Belvedere, helping each other out when needed. And, leading up to the storms, I think is where most of the work ends up taking place. All the prep work and getting things ready, laying out sandbags in known locations where we have trouble spots, and being responsive to residents and their issues. If you can check those items off the list, I think, your job during the storm, when you really need people in the field dealing with public works related stuff, is a lot easier. So we just had a couple of blockages of storm drains, one collapsed line that was under the roadway on Cove Road that we're addressing, which caused a little bit of a blockage on Cove Road at one of our storm drains leading into the Belvedere Lagoon area. And then, of course, we always end up having some problems over on West Shore Road as well, where we have these turnouts with catch basins that flow directly into the bay. It's a really short run with not a lot of fall, and those end up flooding and get plugged up with debris. So we're looking at some upcoming CIP projects to address those, which leads me, I guess, to the bigger project, which is, I'm sure everyone's familiar with, which is a seawall resiliency project. We're looking at, building a seawall on Beach Road and San Rafael Avenue, putting in some sheet piles to stabilize the roadways for earthquake, and then also, improving the utilities in those corridors as well. So if we do have an earthquake, we have a better chance of getting critical infrastructure like water and things like that to the island when we need it. But all in all, thanks for everyone's cooperation over at Tiburon. We'll keep doing what we're doing, and thank you.
And Robert, my understanding is that the Belvedere City Council is going to discuss again the seawall project at their upcoming whatever. Aren't they having some meeting or something, some weekend meeting?
So we're having a meeting on February 9th. I think it's in the evening. And that's going to be a scoping meeting for our environmental impact report, just the draft. So we're hearing people's comments and thoughts on what they think about the proposal. And our engineering staff and the environmental impact firm is going to be analyzing all of those comments and trying to address those in their studies.
Yeah. Well, and as you're well aware, our major concern all along is that we don't get a war going between the island and the lagoon. So
yeah,
do whatever you can to try to
doing our best to keep that from happening.
Yeah. All right, Lori, so is that enough on the winter storm?
I think that's enough on the winter storm.
Okay. Now,
The COVID-19 update, I'm sure everybody is getting very tired of hearing about it, but unfortunately right now it's peaking. And in the past 14 days, Marin County has had 3,812 cases of COVID-19. So we're definitely seeing an all-time high right now, it feels like. And so I just wanted to point out that we are still in it. And if you want the most recent information, go to the Marin County Health and Human Services coronavirus page, and you can get all the latest on what mask requirements are, what the public health order says, the number of vaccinated, the number of infected, the number of hospitalized. There is more information on how to have a safe celebration. I mean, they have everything on that website. Health and Human Services has just done a phenomenal job with their webpage. So if anybody asks you where they can get the latest information, refer them to Health and Human Services.
Well, the one bright spot of it peaking is that it will now be a downward course if it follows anything like what happened in South Africa and the UK. So hopefully we are going to start seeing numbers go down gradually over the next few months, and then we'll have to see what happens with the next variant that comes along. Okay.
And with that, I would very much like to officially introduce Marshall now from the fire department. Marshall came and talked to Mike Lantier and I about a month ago and told us about some new sirens that Southern Marin Fire is looking into. And I'm excited to have him here today to tell all of you about those sirens. Marshall?
Thank you, Lori. And I have a very brief slideshow. If you want, I can put that up on the screen. But thank you so much for having me tonight, everyone. And I appreciate you accommodating me for the end of the meeting. Unfortunately, I've been in a class all day, so I got free as soon as possible. But I can't take all the credit for LRAD since it was Mill Valley who really got the ball rolling in the county. But I've very quickly become the subject matter expert on it, and I'm happy to be here tonight to give you some insights. So let me hop over to my presentation.
And I believe you can now share your screen, yeah. Marshall.
We're all set, Lori. So if you can confirm that you can see that on your side.
I can see it.
So feel free to grab my information. I can share it along with everyone. But this is a project that's been going on since last year. And I'm kind of my second round of installations coming into next month. And we've installed, I think we're up to 7 LRAD stations throughout the Southern Marin area up until today. So, oh, now it's gonna not let me, there it goes. Okay, so LRAD, if you're not familiar with the technology or what it stands for, it's long range acoustical devices. I'll get into a lot of the benefits to this so you have an understanding of it. And I want to go through this relatively quickly so we can get to any sort of questions you may have. But basically with the company LRAD, they were purchased by a parent company called Genesis. So that's actually who I'm working with. And interesting enough, it's all integrated on the Zonehaven platform because Genesis has also recently purchased Zonehaven. So this is kind of the way these big technology companies go nowadays. They start buying up things that they want to build a platform or a package towards. In this case, it's all emergency preparedness and notification. So LRAD, the original technology, they boasted the ability to be able to broadcast a tone, a frequency, or a sound out to about a half mile line of sight and maintain a 70 decibel audible level, which is equivalent to you speaking to someone at a normal level in a room. So that at a half mile, if it's unobstructed, you could still maintain that level of decibel or that sound level with a clear audible message. Currently, the city of Mill Valley advanced forward in 2019 and they replaced all 5 of their rotating beacons, which are very similar, if not identical, to the ones that are currently installed throughout Tiburon. Those 5 stations, they held on to the main infrastructure. They just took the old horn and rotating beacon system off and then replaced them with LRAD. And I have some photographs shortly of that. For us, we have Southern Marin, more specifically through the MWPA, we commissioned 2 sites on our Station 4 and Station 9, so both in Strawberry and Tennessee Valley, Tam Valley, on top of the fire stations, and the rest are going to be located throughout our district on either poles or pre-existing infrastructure. But they're all new installations, which makes it a bit more challenging for me because I have to go through the motions of actually erecting and gaining permissions. Whereas my understanding is Tiburon already has these sirens installed, which from what I've experienced in Mill Valley makes it a lot easier to get these LRAD horns installed in place. The reason why I came to Lori and Mike, a month ago was for this campus here. You have a current station located where that star is located at C. We were entertaining some other options, but after presenting to the Reed School District, we decided that a collaboration effort on this property may be more beneficial to kind of upgrade this one individual siren. A lot of benefits come from that. This is an ideal location for maintenance and access for both our installation purposes and then also ongoing maintenance for LRAD. And then also the coverage that we obtain from this, actually exact location, because we're kind of poised in a bowl for this campus. We're able to broadcast out very clearly and easily to reach the most amount of people. Here, I just want to go through a lot of the kind of variables having to do with LRAD in comparison to kind of the standard siren infrastructures that we see around the county. You'll see a couple photographs in a moment showing the rotating beacon versus a more of a stationary horn that date back on some of our stations before further back than records could go, because I could not find any original records of them on our station. But what LRAD really provides is what I like to refer to as just-in-time messaging. It has the ability to broadcast not just that tone or that siren that you may hear from that rotating beacon, but also a digital voice message that can be either pre-recorded or adjusted in conjunction with sirens. So ultimately, it has the ability to play a basic kind of like an MP3 file. So anything that you can create based on volume or fluctuation in sound, including messaging, can be broadcasted over these sirens and maintained, like I said, at 70 decibels to the point of final kind of rapid decay is how their technology works. LRAD also provides a great reduction in failure compared to some of these other more traditional ones. If you have a single horn, you have that one individual horn that could fail. rendering the entire system not functioning. Also, when you have a rotating beacon, you have a higher probability that the mechanical issues could take place to have it either poised or stuck in a certain direction, and you're not maintaining a 360-degree broadcasting area. Whereas with the stacking mechanism of LRAD, there's multiple horns. You'll see in a moment. Technically, if one did fail, you would still maintain a very large footprint of coverage unless the entire system failed. Now, that's always a point of contention when people ask about notification. We've seen it all the way dating back to 2017, all the way back to the Oakland Hills fire. When communication fails, that's when things start falling apart. And that's what's really nice about the LRAD sites is we've commissioned them with satellite uplink, which means we can access them remotely, similar to the current system, from a desktop PC at the police station or the fire station. But then to add on top of that, they have applications to where you can remote access it from a cellular device if you have permissions and access. You can record your voice directly onto that application and push it through if necessary. And then you can also allow remote access outside of the immediately affected area. For instance, San Rafael, in the command center, in the EOC, OES could potentially also, or no, not potentially, absolutely have access to this as well, and be able to broadcast a similar message or take our warnings from us and broadcast them on our behalf. So it really starts to open up the county to work collaboratively and systematically, depending on the scale of the incident. Each site can be set off separately, all at the same time with different messaging. You have complete control over how you want to utilize it, which is a huge benefit. And I have to admit, I don't know exactly how the current system works that you have there, whether or not you have complete control over each independent one. But I know that is an ability that LRAD has that's quite beneficial, especially when you start getting into the hills of Mill Valley and you want to start trying to control maybe major evacuations. But the redundancy and power that they have is another element of failure that we really like to highlight. So not only do we have shoreline power whenever it's feasible, but we also build them out, at least in our district, with the solar panels necessary to keep the system going for an extended period of time. And then they have the battery backs inside. So in the event of a PSPS event or a major system breakdown, these standalone towers should be able to maintain themselves on a couple different levels to make sure that at least the initial 72 hours, if not more, are easily covered to be able to have them completely accessible. Just to back up for a moment, I mentioned, all these redundancies. There's so many different levels. I mentioned the satellite uplink, as well as, the remote distance. It doesn't rely on that, 5G in the news today, but it doesn't rely on all the typical cellular towers. It's going to be working off satellite. So you could potentially activate them from a satellite phone. And then you could also drive your pickup truck right to the base of those towers or go into the station and pull the mic down and actually manually broadcast a message as if it was just an old school PA system. So the built-in redundancies are kind of layered on top of themselves. Last, just to kind of wrap it up, we have a lot of different county entities currently looking at it. Just today, I received an email requesting from San Rafael to sit down with them to kind of explain the system and what it would take to get them installed. I think as the MWPA advances with funds towards vegetation management, they want to shift it towards evacuation route clearing. And one of the big elements there is we approach that with LRAD, because ultimately that's what we'd be doing, is hopefully helping seamlessly clear the roads a little bit faster in the event of a major scale evacuation. Currently, obviously, Mill Valley, Southern Marin, Central Marin has already been in conversations with Genesis to look at these as well. So I don't have a crystal ball, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is advancing through the county relatively quickly. And with the advent of them purchasing Zone Haven, which a lot of local agencies are, and Marin County is on top of that as well, it just kind of starts to meld all these technologies together in a really, really amazing way. And like I said, I don't know what's coming down the line, but from tsunami warnings to early notification with earthquakes, all these things are potentially available there. To look at the siren itself physically and also its components that we just spoke about. You see the new system here. There's a shot right off the top of our station. We mounted it just above the highest level of our building so that we get that broadcast out, but didn't interrupt with any sort of view issue. The nice part that you'll see in this next photo after this slide, you see the traditional one in the upper right hand corner with the rotating beacon. It's mounted directly on top of the pole. So we actually get a lower footprint when you install these ones because they actually get strapped onto the pole, so that the siren won't extend above the pole in any way unless they put this little 3x3 square satellite box on top. They place that kind of randomly to get the best signal, but at the very most it'd be 3 inches above. And then you see our old style ones. That's our old station 4 down there in the lower hand corner. We just had a couple individually placed horns pointing 180 degrees from each other just to try and maximize that valley. I talked about power during a PSPS event or any other major system shutdown across the whole area. That just-in-time messaging is probably one of the biggest selling points, just the fact that you can push out that critical information, telling people where to go, where not to go. On a law enforcement side, I can't say this for certain because I've never tried it, but I wouldn't be surprised that if you're trying to secure an area that's already been evacuated, you could easily broadcast messages out in certain areas or across the whole area, stating that if anyone's found to be in that area, it's a violation of whatever penal code you want to reference, and that they'll be apprehended and questioned as suspects. So just to let your residents know that you have that capability could really ease a lot of minds if they're sitting across the bay looking at their homes wondering if everything's safe. And then obviously the future uses of Zone Haven. So these are, the far left is actually the exact tower that we're looking at upgrading at the Belvedere School. So that's a shot from down below. Boxes are equivalent. Solar panels are also equivalent. And then that horn on top will get lowered down, similar to that picture that you see on the right. And those are 2 shots of, I want to say, the same tower behind a school in Mill Valley, where they took off that rotating beacon on the top and lowered it down to provide the broadcast. And in this circumstance, you see they're stacking 4 horns high. They're actually called 2 horns in each one, so that's 8 horns pointing in one direction. That specific site found it was necessary to point off in each direction. One thing that maybe if you wanted to call a drawback to LRAD is it's got great coverage, but what we have to do afterwards is a little bit of sound sculpting. And you may have to increase or rotate those horns to get the most optimal sound coverage for your area. Obviously, it'd be nice to be able to map this ahead of time and just put in perfectly. The benefit, or at least making lemonade out of lemons, we've launched a Did You Hear It campaign on our website, mainly out of public outreach to let people know that we have these sirens and we maybe start testing them in their backyard or near their homes. But also it's a great way to reach out to the schools and offer them some sort of STEM interaction with the fire department. And we're planning on rolling this out into some of the classrooms coming into the fall to try and encourage some of these STEM teachers to utilize this. It's modeled off of what USGS does with earthquakes. About 10 years ago, they realized that everyone's got a smartphone in their pocket and they're a great seismometer. And if you put your information in right away, that's how they populate those maps so quickly with USGS after an earthquake of where people felt it. Same thing here, where people hear it, they give us a detailed description of what they're doing, whether inside their car, inside their house, walking their dog, their best location of where they were when they heard it. And so when we run these tests or run our evacuation drills, we can populate that information on a map and then provide that back to a teacher for them to show their students, this is what you did as your assignment this weekend during the testing period. So it's kind of this curriculum that we're trying to framework out on top of our campaign that we already launched. So I think the final slide I have is what the system looks like fully erected with everything on it. They dig down below ground, set a pole. We're doing steel poles in our new installations just to build that redundancy in the event of a fire spread. But that's the end of my presentation. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Well, Marshall, thank you very much. That is very informative. How much time do you have? We understood that you were under time constraints. Was that just getting here?
No. Yeah, that's, it's getting here, but I'll give you all the time in the world. I'll be
All right.
happy to ask you. Answer
So
questions.
we do not have all the time in the world, unfortunately, because there's a town hall group that actually helped
Oh,
5:30 to start their meeting for us. So we have 15 minutes.
Okay,
okay. Well,
15 minutes. Jamie,
oh, Jamie, you're muted.
you're muted.
Were these installed on last Saturday?
Last Saturday was not the first, was it?
No,
No.
it was with the tsunami because,
I have not been able to get any firsthand reporting of whether or not they were activated. Unfortunately, I'm more on the prevention and installation side of it. So operationally, if
well,
I don't think we
I'll
have
give
too
you
many near the
some,
coast.
I'll give you some feedback, which is
Yeah.
that I was at the Sausalito fuel dock Saturday morning before 8 o'clock. And when the sirens went off, we heard the Tiburon and Belvedere ones, but we didn't hear anything from the Mill Valley or the Sausalito side.
Yeah. So my guess is they probably did not activate. And mill valleys are tucked pretty high up in the mountains, or at least into the valleys. So they're designed to broadcast into the hills for early notification. And there are not currently any installed in Sausalito yet. Those are slated to be installed this weekend.
Okay,
Yeah, that's my thought behind that. I don't know if we would have reached too many of the shores with where we have them currently.
right. Okay.
Lori, in conjunction with that, did we put anything out over Snap Radio on Saturday?
Yes, the message is actually still on Snap Radio, but we put something out on Snap, on Nextdoor. We sent out our electronic bulletins, Twitter, Instagram. Yes.
And we don't have any idea what percentage of the population ever tunes into Snap Radio, do we? I guess there's no way of knowing that.
You know what? Alert Marin is the way to go. And Alert Marin was actually the first notification to go out. That went out before the sirens even sounded. And Marin County OES sent Alert Marin notification to the entire county.
No, I think what we want to do though is stress redundancy. And Alert Marin being the first one, but certainly Snap Radio, if it works, and that's my question, would be something that people should know about.
Yes, and 8:40 a.m. does work. It's just not heard on all radios in all parts of town. It has to be a pretty strong radio, like a car radio, and you can't get too terribly. It's kind of a line of sight deal. If you got too many hills between the radio tower and your radio, you probably won't hear it.
Well, Ryan, that's my next question. Our little family service radios that our block captains use are fairly good. The line of sight's a problem though, because if we try to get them over the hill to the west side of Belvedere or over the hill to the east side of Tiburon, that doesn't work very well. Is that going to be a problem with LRAD and with stuff? You say a 70 decibel for half a mile, but does that go over a hill and down the backside of a hill?
No, it does not. So the best you can get with that, and one example I can give is in Mill Valley, around the hills in the golf course area. So like I said, with that sound sculpting, it's a kind of an after the fact. So you place them and you direct the horns so that any obstructions that are immediately in front of them, dense tree canopy, hills, you try and shoot those gaps that you have to broadcast it. They have some upward tilt and some downward tilt. So not a ton, but if you did place them in a strategic location, you could broadcast and cover that area. That hill is going to stop that sound. But if you can aim it in the gap and bounce it, the sound is so effective, it can actually resonate off a more distant hillside and then bounce to the opposite side.
So what we would have to do is best guess, put them in where we think they're going to work and test them. And if they don't work, if we have blind spots, we would simply be obligated to put another siren in that area, probably.
Yeah. So, and my understanding is you're in the similar boat with the ones you have now. That rotating beacon just puts out a similar tone in all directions as it rotates. But yes, that's what we're looking at already. Is once we get these ones placed, that's why we have our Did You Hear It campaign, so that we can quickly identify what areas do we have what we're calling a drop zone, where there's no coverage at all, and then strategically decide, do we want to put an additional horn here, or is this area not necessary for whatever alerts we're intending on putting out.
And Mike, on the peninsula, we have 7 of them? 6, 7 sirens?
My understanding is 6.
6.
Six.
So, and you're telling me that we can modify the existing sirens? I heard some time ago that we would have to put up entirely new sirens for LRAD.
So I mean, you're not saving a ton by doing it. The cost is still relatively there. You may be able to reduce the number of speakers you need, which could take off, a few thousand here or there. Ultimately, though, the entire system, the brains of it all, the battery system, that all would have to be replaced and upgraded. The benefit is you don't have to do nearly as much, if any, environmental review because you've already drilled a hole in the ground. You don't have to go through extensive, view issues or any sort of aesthetics, cultural resources, all the stuff that we're running into right now. What I found with those existing swap outs, they were seamless. You could just basically, make sure you had any sort of permitting necessary with the town and then just take care of it, which is much more simple than having to, obtain permissions. Granted, I believe town of Tiburon, you're probably most of the property owners in these circumstances, but going through the motions that were already done with those original 6 sites.
And how far are we from having an estimate of what this whole project would cost for the entire peninsula? Not just Belvedere or Tiburon, but both.
I'm definitely not the person that can provide you with that. You can get a quote for, just first off for how many you have. If you were to do 5 of them, we sat around 600,000 for 5. That was for brand new installations. So it was including the steel poles, and all the labor and work. So that's a good ballpark figure. It'd probably come out a little under that, but again, with everything going up in price nowadays, it's a little bit more challenging. We're installing 2 additional right now, and those are sitting right under. It was 275,000. They came in a little under budget, but that's for the total of 7. Those estimates were provided to us. The larger one was an entire year and a half ago. So my guess is those costs have probably gone up a little bit as far as material costs. But they've got a relatively quick build time. It's somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks. They can build them out. And they've met those really early on for me, and they're eager to get up here and get them installed.
And has there ever been any attempt to get the county to provide a county-wide system for LRAD and, for the whole thing?
That answer is not within my scope at this point in time. I can definitely I can look into that and find out a little more for you and see if I can find out. I know that there's a lot of sirens installed throughout the county. They all seem to have been installed independently, either by local municipalities or agencies.
It's all
and they've never really ran collectively, but the OES does have access to many of them. Sorry, this light just turned on me and I've got a shadow on my face. But that is the best of my knowledge right now, but I'll look into that.
Other questions? We're running out of time here, I guess. Anybody? Chris? Jamie?
Oh, no, for me.
Okay. Well, Lori, you got time constraints, so
Yeah.
why don't we, and Giuseppe, are you still on? Any questions from you?
I am here. No questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, well, Lori, why don't we call it quits then, and our next meeting will be April 19th.
So our next meeting is April 19th, and at that point, maybe we'll have some costs associated with the sirens. I'm sure Mike and I are going to be maybe looking into this a little more, so we can report back an update maybe at the next meeting if we've learned anything new.
All right.
Well, thank you very much for your patience with me today and our late start. I appreciate it. You'd think I'd be done with the technological challenges, but
I don't think we're ever going to be done with these technological issues.
so thank you all. Nice to see your faces.
Good to see you, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Good night.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you all.